Hour. Hello. Recording.
Okay, great. So it's 6:35 and we're going to start the meeting. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to CB3 Land Use Committee meeting for Tuesday, August 18, 2020. We are conducting the meeting through Zoom tonight, and my vice chair, Linda, is managing the platform, and she's going to give a brief introduction about the Zoom functions and also some guidelines. Linda?
Okay. I think at this point, most of us kind of know how to work Zoom, but you should know how to mute and unmute yourself, which if you're using a computer, you have a button down at the bottom left of your screen to do that with. If you're using a cell phone, you need to hit F6. The other thing is knowing how to raise your hand. And to raise your hand, you go to the bottom of the participants list, pop up the participants list, and go to the bottom and you'll see a raise hand. We would like everyone who is a guest here to sign in using the chat. That's our official attendance list. You just put your name and your affiliation in the chat, so we'll have it for later. Okay, that's it, Jackie.
Okay, so Linda, before the meeting, Linda told me to remind everyone that please use the chat box for check-in and also ask technical questions or procedure questions only. You can put your name, title, and affiliation in the chat box, but please do not use the chat box to share your point of view or discuss any issues. I understand it can be very tempting to do so, but if you do it, you will be removed from the meeting. This is a CB3 policy. And also, I attended the parliamentary procedure workshop organized for CB members last week. I just want to reiterate that everyone who wants to speak to raise their hands and get recognized by the chairperson first, which is me. So this is to maintain the order of the meeting so we can move it better. We hope to close the meeting 8 p.m. tonight so everyone can watch the convention if they choose to. So tonight, our first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes for our July meeting. Michael, can you do a roll calling to see if everyone approves, oppose, abstain, or PNV at the same time? Take the attendance, please.
Sure. Jackie, how do you vote?
I'm sorry, hold on 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
How do you
Michael?
vote?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Linda, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Michael, I vote yes. Dominic, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Herman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Trevor?
Yes.
Thank you, Trevor. Lisa, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Olympia? How do you vote?
Olympia, I think you are muted.
I think you're saying yes. Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Damaris, I don't think I saw Damaris, but does anyone know if she's on? Skip that. Troy, how do you vote?
Oh, you are muted.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Troy. Steve, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Steve. And Tim. Is Tim Laughlin here? I don't see him in the group. Okay, great. We're all set. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Michael. Next item is 2 Bridges Rezoning Co-application update and request for support for application memo and cover letter to Department of City Planning. So DCP has given us a negative response on our rezoning application back in March, and in May we CB3 hired consultant George James to prepare strategic memos and a reasonable worst case development scenario memo to help us analyze the situation and also make recommendations. The co-applicants wants to resubmit the rezoning application based on George's opinions, actually one of his opinions, and they also request a CB3 to co-sign a cover letter for resubmitting. What we want to do this evening is to review the 2 memos and decide if CB3 should sign on that letter. We have a baby talking. Let me see who is.
It was me. Can you hear me now? That's
okay,
good news.
I can hear you very well. Olympia, you might want to mute yourself. Thank you. And tonight we have Madeline from CAV and Elise from GOES. They are going to give us a presentation for about 15 to 20 minutes. I understand committee member may have questions during the presentation. You can ask them, but try not to stop them too often and too long because we want to keep it moving. And I believe our consultant George and the lawyer for the co-applicants Paula are both present. Is Paula, is George present tonight?
No, but Chris Walters is here, who's the planner who we've been working with on the application for the last
year. So the committee members can ask them questions after the presentation. We can ask them questions as well, and following that, it will be a public session, and then committee member will debate whether we should approve this letter, decline, or make change to the letters. So so Melanie and Elise, you can start.
We have a couple of slides that we'd like to share just to provide some visuals for this. So Lynn, would it be possible to enable screen sharing on my end?
Linda, you are mute.
I'm on mute?
No, Linda is on mute.
Okay.
Linda, are you making Melanie a co-host? Thank you.
It has been done.
Thank you.
I'm still finding I'm not able to screen share. And I don't think I'm a co-host.
Try again.
Okay, here we go. Okay, let's do a full screen. How is this? How is the size of this for folks?
Good.
Okay. I think you can see our presenter notes at the bottom, but that's not a very big deal. Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Cool. So thanks everyone for having us. Again, introduction. My name is Elise High Street. I'm an organizer at Goals. Melanie Wong is an organizer at CAV. And then we have our technical assistance team here, Paula Siegel, who's an attorney at Take Root Justice, and Chris Walters, who's a rezoning technical assistant at ANHD. Cool, so let's just get into it. So as most of you know, the co-applicant group consists of 4 of us. So the first group is Tenants United Fighting for the Lower East Side. This is a group of tenants that live in the neighborhood that this plan will be affecting. And then you have good old Lower East Side, local community organization, as well as CAV, another community organization, and you all, Manhattan Community Board 3.
Now the next couple of slides, we're just going to go over the basic outline of the proposal. I know that land use committee members are well familiar with this proposal, but just for the general public, and then also as a little recap, because it's been some time since we last presented at land use. Within the next couple slides, we have just kind of the details of the proposal's content and a bit of a historical timeline of our work on the proposal. But first off, what we're looking at right now is the map of the proposed rezoning area, which I know the street names are a little bit difficult to see on this graphic, but this sort of large diagonal here is the Manhattan Bridge, right? And really what we're looking at are these blocks in the immediate vicinity of the bridge in the Two Bridges area. So here under the bridge, going across this way is Cherry Street. This is the FDR, right? And then this is Catherine Street on the far end, and on the far end over here, I believe is Water Street and Gouverneur. So yeah, and then the map also shows, this is the map that we submitted with the reasonable worst case development scenario. So it also shows current zoning designations and so forth. As a general overview of the goals of this proposal, we want to remind you all that the specific requirements and overall goals come from the Chinatown Working Group Plan and the larger history of community-based planning that led to the development of that plan in particular, which we'll review very briefly in the proposal highlights. But the essential core values, core goals behind this plan include ensuring that future development prioritizes affordable housing, particularly at AMI levels, accessible to the existing community, and then also prioritizes development of commercial establishments and community spaces that serve the existing community. Yeah. Next, we're going to share a couple of the basic land use requirements within the proposal, but these are just a fraction of what's actually in there. Lise?
Yeah. So you all have access to the full plan if you want to like learn more of the specifics. But I'll quickly go through these. So 50% permanently affordable housing requirement in all new or enlarged residential development with AMIs at the lowest levels so they're accessible to this community. Height limit of 350 feet on all new development. At least 60% open space and permeable surfaces on new development sites where feasible. Require schools, affordable food markets, or community supportive uses for ground floors, and 40-foot frontage limits for banks and drugstores. And again, these all come from the goals of this plan. Melanie, you're on mute.
Okay.
You're on mute. There you go.
There you go. I was saying we wanted to offer a little bit of timeline just to give context for the long process behind this proposal, but I also know many members of this committee are intimately familiar with this history in a variety of ways, having sat through many, many long meetings that are encompassed within this timeline. But as referenced earlier, the bones of this plan are directly drawn from the Chinatown Working Group Plan for the immediate area, and that dates back to the start of the CWG group in 2008. We picked up the project as community organizations in 2017, and the community board formally voted to become a co-applicant on the proposal in 2017. That would be this committee. Our initial meeting with DCP was 2017, and between late 2017 and now, we've been going through the initial stages of the application process. So these are some of the highlights, and at this point, we are, as Jackie stated earlier, we are on our third draft of our reasonable worst case development scenario. We received feedback on our last draft on March 16th, which was, as everyone knows, right as things were taking a pretty serious turn in the city. So our sort of planning and thinking and timeline in recent months obviously has been seriously impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, right? but so I just want to emphasize that this has been a very long process, and we are very far along, I would say, into the application process at this point.
So since March, once we all went on lockdown, we initially decided to put a pause on the project so we could all figure out our respective reactions and plans to COVID. We got back together in May to revisit the application and weighed out our options and decided to revise the reasonable worst case development scenario and continue our communication with DCP as it provides the most options for us moving forward. The community board engaged urban planner George James to help us with the reasonable worst case. So he helped with the technical edits and also prepared a strategy memo. And then with James, our technical team completed the edits, which is now prepared for resubmission. We also prepared a letter to accompany said resubmission that offers responses to the questions posed by DCP and lays out our plan a little bit more specifically.
Simply put, we are coming to the land use committee today because as co-applicants, we want to continue to move forward the application by resubmitting a third draft of the reasonable worst case. And in addition to submitting a third draft, also submitting it alongside a letter that uses the opportunity to respond to some technical concerns raised by DCP. And then you all have a draft of that letter, and that's specifically what we're asking for the land use committee's vote of approval on so that Alicia can sign it on behalf of the board. And then after submission of this third draft and letter, we would anticipate some sort of response from DCP within 90 days because their response timeline is mandated by law. So that's the extent of our presentation. And we will pause here for questions or discussion.
All right. I want to start the first question. Since George James talked about two scenarios for us. One is onward, one is let's make a deal. Can you briefly share with us what are those two options?
Jackie, your speaker is cutting out.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
A little bit fuzzy.
Is it fuzzy?
Yeah. Also, Jackie, the letter that Melanie just said we received, is this the one that is in the calendar of CB3 or some other letter?
Hold on 1 second. Can you guys hear me now? Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. And what is your question, Olympia?
Melanie just said we received the letter that she wants us to approve, but I'm not sure whether she means the DCP letters that are posted on the calendar because we didn't receive a letter from you.
Oh, so so basically that letter was saying that I don't know if you read, I didn't post.
You are breaking again.
I'm sorry. Is it better now? Okay, so I didn't post that DCP letter for you guys because I don't want to overwhelm the committee member. That DCP letter has a lot of technical challenges and also questions. And the memo created by George James already provided context for you to understand that that's what we believe, because we are posting a lot of, otherwise we are posting a lot of information to the committee members and also to the public. But if you read George James' memo, he was basically saying that he used the term devastating to describe DCP's response. Okay, so Melanie.
Sorry, Jackie, just to clarify though, Olympia, I'm sorry, a technical clarification. What you were being asked to approve is on the website calendar. That letter is on the website calendar.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. I understood that. Thank you.
It's responding to what Jackie was just describing. Right?
Thank you.
Response to that. Yeah.
It's the document titled Draft Cover Letter for Reasonable Worst Case Development Scenario, right? It's a cover letter to accompany the resubmission. And as co-applicants, each co-applicant group would need to sign.
Lisa has her hand up.
Lisa?
That's all I was going to clarify, the same thing that was just
Thank you.
clarified.
Oh, thank you.
Melanie, can you put it in the chat?
Yes, I can put it in the chat, 1 second.
And Melanie, can you share with us the onward and let's make a deal scenarios?
Okay, so what Jackie is referencing is sort of an analysis framework that George James presented in his strategy memo. I want to emphasize that George was engaged by the community board, and the memo was written for the community board. So I can kind of explain it a little bit, my understanding of George's analysis, right? But I am kind of a third party to this analysis, that said. So essentially, the letter we got back in March 16th from DCP in regards to our second draft of the reasonable worst case development scenario, discussed technical issues and edits to the application, but also gave strong indication that that DCP essentially was unlikely to continue to move this application forward in an active way because of disagreements with the planning rationale behind our proposal, right? And I think that's something that's been understood from the early days of the Chinatown Working Group and from the early days of this rezoning proposal, is that what we are doing, both in terms of its content and in terms of its process, is atypical in comparison with kind of standard processes and standard applicants and sort of ideologies of planning, right? We're making, different
Olympia, can you mute your microphone?
Different base assumptions about where planning rationale should come from and sort of what the goals are for zoning law in the neighborhood. So these kinds of objections on DCP's part are not at all surprising, and we've discussed these kinds of objections repeatedly, throughout the process. But this is the first time. This is the first time in receiving that letter that DCP essentially put it really clearly in writing, right? And it felt as if they were not responding to our proposal as a technical document, and it was not necessarily coming from their position of responsibility to carry the technical document through the application process, but rather from the perspective of the City Planning Commission's ultimate role in voting an application yes or no, right? Which is supposed to be much further down the line. So when Jackie's referring to George's sort of onwards analysis within the strategy memo, George took a look at this situation and took a look at DCP's rhetoric in the letter and so forth, and gave some background and context to why, in the face of this kind of clear opposition, it may make sense for us to continue to move forward the application, right? And essentially, George describes two options. One, which is moving forward the application despite potential future opposition from CPC. And I want to emphasize CPC, right? Like City Planning Commission level, not DCP. And then the other option, which he calls let's make a deal, would be going back to the application, making major revisions to its content and essentially to its very nature in order to compromise between DCP's planning principles and ours, right?
Olympia, your mic is open again.
I am not opening it, so I don't know what's happening, guys.
You are not mute. Let me see.
The rationale between
But I mean, I don't know if it's still up. I guess it isn't.
I think the rationale between potentially compromising with DCP is pretty straightforward, but I want to emphasize that we as community groups are not there yet. And obviously I can't speak for the entire co-applicant group, but in terms of goals, in terms of CAV, we've had these discussions internally in terms of top LES. We are not ready to give up on the core principles behind this plan, both in terms of the logic of its planning rationale, and then also in terms of our commitment to the original CWG plan and sort of the community-led process that led to that. And we feel that making major revisions to all of that would compromise sort of the integrity of this process, right? So as community groups, we are not prepared to go down the route of compromise right now, and we believe that we have an obligation, and we also have a commitment as organizations to continue moving forward the plan as close to the original as possible, as far as possible. In the sort of onward scenario in George's memo, he kind of outlines the rationale for doing that, right? And essentially, it's along the lines of what I've already articulated, right? Our proposal and the CWG plan as a larger whole come from a very long history of community planning in the neighborhood, involve the input and the input and discussion and priorities of a wide variety of stakeholders, and represent a unique planning process when compared to what's been done in other parts of the city, or what DCP's like typical rezoning looks like. And you know, not only do we stand by the actual rezoning requirements within the proposal, but also believe that commitment to that larger process is really important. And George essentially outlines, you know, moving forward through the technical parts of this process, despite potential future opposition from the City Planning Commission, is still a logical thing to do, because the City Planning Commission is mayorally appointed, and we are nearing the end of the current mayoral administration, right? So the basic sort of political assumptions or like administrative points of view that are shaping the decisions that the commissioner is making right now are essentially like time limited, right? And so if we continue to move through the technical parts of this process, we will, even if this current commission and this current mayor has strong opposition to the plan, there are definitely openings in the near-term future to actually get it passed.
All right. Before I let Lisa speak, Linda, can you let Tanisha in? I think she's waiting. Is that right?
Ah, yes. Okay.
Thank you, Linda. And Lisa.
Yeah, I just have one question and then maybe one comment, but I'm basically fine with the letter. My question is about the final paragraph in the letter, which says if we don't receive a confirmation by a certain date, we will accept your statement in the prior letter that this plan will remain incomplete and the proposal will be unable to advance as a final agency determination. What is your purpose in that paragraph? What's that getting at?
I can speak to that if unless I don't know.
Go ahead, Paula.
We're not coordinated very well, but I think we got this. So we really need to know from the Department of City Planning where we're at. Because just like developers, when they submit their applications for rezonings to facilitate their projects, excuse me, we can submit as many drafts as we want, right? Like we can keep spending my time and Chris's time redrafting and redrafting. There's very little we can still change, but we can just keep going. But actually they wrote a letter in March that lays out not what's technically wrong with how we present the reasonable worst case development scenarios, but why they disagree with what we're trying to do. And we're trying to, in this resubmission, to say, okay, you know what, we're gonna give it one more shot because it's not your job to say why you disagree with the content. So let's try it. Let's try one more third draft. There's a couple of changes we'll make, clean up a couple of numbers, nothing major. And this long cover letter kind of explaining why a lot of their comments just don't belong at this part in the process. They belong on the political end after it's been certified. But if they don't review for the technical, we want to know where we're at. We want to say, okay, we're done. We're not going to submit any more drafts. Maybe we'll consider another strategy. Maybe we'll consider court, maybe something, but we can't just keep coming back and redrafting and redrafting. We want to give them a way to signal to us, like, no, we're not going to change our position from March, or yes, okay, thanks for making these technical changes. Let's just pretend it was about that. We'll move forward.
So no, when I read that sentence, paragraph, whatever it is, I guess it's both a sentence and a paragraph, it kind of sounded like a threat. And I guess as a community board, it would be important for us to know if this was leading to a clear conclusion that the next step was a suit, which we couldn't enter into.
That makes perfect sense. So one of the strengths of and that's a great question. Thank you so much, Lisa. One of the strengths of this application is that there's the community board as one applicant, which has been here for this whole process and like kind of been the steward of the working groups and everything that's happened in the last 7 years. But there's also independent not-for-profit organizations that represent different interests in the neighborhoods and can act independently. So once we have a clear signal from DCP about which way they want to go with this, then the different actors can choose what to do based on what they want to do next. And it's clear to us that there's no, maybe for the community board, understanding that March letter with its harsh language is a final agency determination will mean maybe the community board wants to think about how to approach this or wants to have a different set of meetings with the mayor, right? Like, we're done working through the agency, we're done working with the environmental review people because we're not getting anywhere with them. Maybe we want to try to leverage the borough president's office. Maybe we want to revisit who the applicants are because maybe we'll get seen differently. But having that clarity there as like, this is the final determination, that'll mean one thing for the community board. It might mean some slightly different things for the other independent organizations that are co-applicants that kind of are created differently, governed differently, and have different restrictions. So one of the applicants could choose to sue based on knowing that March letter is a final agency determination. And it sounds like one, right? That is their language. This application will remain incomplete. But that's not where anybody wants to go right now. We're really trying to figure out a way to thread the needle and get back into the administrative process and not go that route at all and have them say like, okay, thanks for this long letter. Let's scrap all that March analysis and just accept your reasonable worst case so we can all draft an environmental assessment statement and submit that and actually get it certified so that the community board can treat this ULURP application like every other ULURP application and actually assess the merits as opposed to getting stuck in the technical.
Olympia.
Thank you. I had another comment, but I'd be glad to wait.
I'm sorry, Lisa, sorry. No,
but I'm glad to wait if you want other people to talk, and then I'll just make, there's one section that I have a problem with.
I also have one session that I feel like is a little bit problematic, but I'll let Olympia speak first.
I'm happy for you guys I am happy for Lisa to finish her thing. I can wait.
Lisa?
Okay.
Your session?
Okay. My concern is about the paragraph, the final paragraph on page 3 that goes on to the beginning of page 4 with regard to the height. Well, it's about the open space, really. And it takes the position that we think Tower in the Park buildings are perfectly fine in this area, and I just can't get there without qualification. I feel like, yeah, there are Tower in the Park buildings there, but I have a really hard time saying that that's exactly what we want to do without qualifying it by saying if coupled with height restrictions. And also saying, I wondered if we could change the last sentence on page 4. I'm sorry, it's last paragraph on page 4 going on to page 5. I think I said 3 and 4. If we said low coverage buildings are more appropriate here than high coverage contextual buildings, than a high contextual building, end of sentence. This requirement is consistent with current design vernacular within the special district. I don't want to say that we love Tower in the Park buildings without qualification, because I hate them.
Okay, I just want to say quickly that we anticipated this kind of these kind of edits would come up, and we are comfortable making them now, provided that they don't create, technical issues with the content of the letter.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think, Lisa, the kind of qualification, and our technical team is here to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that kind of qualification would not actually make any changes to the overall integrity of the letter. So we're happy to work with the wording. And I have screen shared my my copy of the letter here for that purpose. So I guess I'm happy to be secretary if the committee wants to sort of discuss what they find to be appropriate, and then we'll give feedback as necessary.
There's also a spelling error. I'm sorry. I've never learned how to spell neighborhood. It's in the middle of page 4.
Let Madeline do like
Spell check.
yeah.
Sorry.
Editing.
Melanie, on that same line, there's actually I think there's 2 periods at the beginning of that sentence.
Perfect.
Check.
Okay, and Olympia.
I mean, I agree with what Lisa just said. I think when they coined the term towers in the park, towers didn't have the steroids that they have these days. So, I mean, I don't know. I had a couple of comments. I mean, first of all, actually, I have a comment about the fact that we put the memo of James and this letter on our website, and they say like draft not to distribute confidential, and especially James, he uses words like lip service and stuff like that I think they're very informal, and I'm not, have you cleared it by posting this publicly? I mean, he could be even sued for defamation. I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not sure this was supposed to be public. So I don't know. This is one comment. So my comment about the presentation right now is I'm interested also in the strategy level. You are not mentioning that lawsuit that happened and that development. And when all this thing was happening, we always said that we were applying for this rezoning also as some sort of, what do we call it? Like back game or whatever it's called. So is there something that we should be considering on that level?
Only time. So far, sorry, Jackie, may I speak?
Yeah, so I just want to respond to Olympia a little bit about like what to publicize and what not, because we feel like without publishing that, then people will not have the context to understand what we are trying to approve tonight. So that's why we want to publish that memo online.
Then maybe it shouldn't say confidential. I mean, I don't know.
Once you public, it's not confidential, right? When it's public, is nothing really confidential. And also, we have been having a lot of transparency issue in the past few months. So I just want to make sure that everybody has the same access to what we have. And I'll let Paula to answer the question about the lawsuit.
So the lawsuit is ongoing. In fact, 3 of them. The courts in New York State are organized like a pyramid. They have 3 levels. So all 3 cases won at the first level, and the city and the developers have appealed all 3 cases at the second level. And the case that was brought by the city council and the borough president has been argued, and the judges listened carefully, and they're thinking about what to do. And the case that was brought by TUF and CAV and Goals and the NYCHA residents, oh my goodness, LaGuardia, and that case, the developers in the city just filed their appeal. We're working out a briefing schedule. Then there's a 3rd case that was brought by a different set of community groups. Also, the developers in the city just filed their appeal. They're working out the briefing schedule. It'll take some time. Appeals at the second level are as of right, meaning the developers in the city get to appeal. They don't have to ask for permission. Depending on what happens at the second level, whoever loses could ask for permission to appeal at the 3rd level. But the lawsuits themselves are just about procedure. They're not about what can be built in the neighborhood. They're about were those buildings properly approved back in December of 2018. They're like frozen in time from that December of 2018 moment. And even if the lawsuits are as successful as they can be, the developers can just start over unless the underlying rules are changed. And so what we're trying to do right now is change the underlying rules. So yeah, winning the lawsuits in the end will be fantastic. It already feels pretty good that everybody won at the first level, right? We got ourselves a lot more time to make these changes to the underlying rules. But win or lose, all the lawsuits do is they strike down that City Planning Commission vote, all on the basis of the idea that it wasn't the City Planning Commission's job to vote for different reasons. But basically that's the argument all 3 cases made, is it wasn't up to the City Planning Commission. So the fact that they approved it is not a proper approval. End of story. So from my perspective as the litigator on one of those cases, I would love to see the rules changed as quickly as possible. So too much more delay in this administrative process that DCP has introduced here. It's a bit frustrating, but on the other hand, we're in a good position, right? Where we're the ones with the win right now.
Thank you, Paula. Let me see, do I see more hands here? Nope, okay, so Jim, I have a question for you. There's a session, I'm not entirely sure whether I understand this correctly. So
is this, you're talking about the letter or the
the cover letter. The last paragraph of page 1 to the first and second paragraph and third paragraph of page 2. So basically it is talking about the roles of DCP and also how they do their business. I just want to be sure that the description, everything is correct.
Yeah.
So this is what Paula was just talking about. This is kind of the little in the weeds technically, but this is exactly what the prior comment just before talking about the lawsuit, that's what this was addressing, right? So the question at hand that you can think about, right, is if DCP made a determination, right, which we were trying to figure out, right, that's one of the goals here, is to say, was that March 16th letter, a determination or not? And also, right, one of the other things to figure out is if it was a determination, were they, technically kind of crossing the threshold of what would be appropriate for them to sort of comment on at that point in the process, right? I mean, and the argument, right, being made here is that there were, and this is also outlined in George's memo. There's a history of of the City Planning Commission and DCP as their agency that helps them fulfill their tasks, sort of slow walking, right, projects that had kind of political or policy recommendations that differed from the department's goals, right? And then there were rules established under the prior city planning commissioner that said, look, we need to streamline a number of things in the public review process. One of those things is kind of this issue of slow walking projects for political reasons, right? And saying that you have to kind of let them go through review as technically complete. And this is just sort of citing a number of different rules, right? ULURP rules, which are rules of the City of New York, having to do with land use applications, as well as the establishment of the rule we just talked about that goes into a little bit more detail about like what the rationale was behind that. And I mean, you can look up those citations. The citations are provided. You can. I think there are even hyperlinks. You could follow the links to read about it in more detail. I think there's probably pushback that DCP may have on this, but that's kind of why you send the letter, I guess, is how I would frame it. Is I can anticipate some things they may say here, but we won't know until we, posit this particular interpretation and hear a response. Does that make sense? I mean, does everyone follow that?
Yes, for me.
Right. I mean, the question is can they be largely the changes asked for, right, in their comments that we haven't addressed are ones that as Melanie very eloquently explained would like change substance of the application, right? It would be things having to do with the set asides of affordable housing or the regulations around commercial uses, right? Which like what we're proposing here is not necessarily in DCP's vision of how you would develop this area, or any area, right? Because it has a serious, significant affordable housing set aside for one, beyond MIH. But the question is, can they ask us to change that on that basis alone, right? On this question of policy, the application, based on with the reviews that we are now considering, should be largely technically complete, right? We've cleaned up a lot of the technical issues, and we've tried to address every instance where they say, please provide a rationale. That's what the body of this letter largely does. It responds to individual instances where they said, at least give us a rationale here if you're going to propose something unorthodox in our interpretation of city planning. So yeah, I mean, that's what's happening here.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that I guess I want to make sure that that paragraph actually is the correct description. I guess like DCP might push back on that eventually, but I just feel like you as a planner, when we land use committee is recommending CP3 to sign on this letter, I want you as a planner to make sure like you also comfortable with that description. That is like my question.
I guess what I would say is, like, if you look at history, they've certainly done this before, historically, done the thing before that we are saying they cannot do in this letter, right? And the question is this rule change, honored by the current planning commissioner, right? Does there need to be a clearly established rule if this is not the current rule, right? I mean, that's a question. I mean, I don't know what they're going to say. I'm trying to anticipate, but I can tell you in the past, right? I mean, they have done this. They've also stated that they won't do it anymore. They likely, although I can't say definitively because I haven't been on other land use applications during this administration, but they've likely done this again, right, during this administration. And they probably have concocted a justification for it, but that's kind of why you send the letter, right? You try to get into that conversation, and then that may be the grounds for some sort of legal action in the future. But this is sort of like, let's make sure we understand what you're saying and you understand what we're saying.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Olympia.
Yes, I mean, I feel very comfortable with us saying this because it's shameful, you know, and I think it is our role to say this. I'm also wondering, and maybe it's a theoretical question, but one of the things that had been most frustrating and offensive throughout the Two Bridges process was the seeker manual, right? And so the whole way of how do you define these reasonable whatever scenarios was very often basically technically sound, but completely logical by any stretch of the imagination. And so I'm wondering whether, because I think in the past, especially during the process of the Two Bridges that we were all involved in, we had discussed, you know, some initiatives that were at the city level about the evaluation of seeker. And I know, you know, ANHD, Chris is here today, and others were involved. Actually, even Mifung was involved in that process. I don't know if it was officially a CB3 or something else. So, I mean, I don't know if there is any value in adding any comment around that in this letter, or whether we as Community Board 3 want to resume in a future agenda discussing that, because if we don't change the seeker, as a land use committee, we will be reading a lot of crap, sincerely, in the future.
Oh, Olympia, I don't know, Jackie, can I respond directly?
Yeah, Paula, yes.
So the portion of the process that we are in at the moment is not yet governed by SECRA. Luckily, and what makes this really simple and makes our advocacy job kind of easy, because all we need to do is point out to DCP, is that in 2016, the City Planning Commission adopted specific brand new rules about what's supposed to happen before there's an EIS, all the steps before there's actually an environmental impact statement that's going to be governed by SECRA. And that's where we are. We are squarely in the middle of that. There are specific regulations. They're supposed to follow them. We're reminding them of what they are in the paragraphs that Jackie pointed out, because they're pretty new. These regulations were not the law before 2013. They didn't exist. But that's where this whole process lives, is it lives in this area where there were no regulations. People kind of did what they wanted. DCP would, you know, work quickly with folks they like, work slowly with folks they didn't like. And lots of people saw that as a problem and created a whole regulatory system for that piece of the process. So that's the piece of the process we're in now. We're not yet at the SECRA stage.
Thank you, Paula. The reason I brought up the issue about this session is because, like, when I compared this against George's comment, it looks like there are some discrepancies between what he described, or even what he described looks like different administrations seems to have different practice. That's why I want to make sure that we all comfortable with this a few paragraphs.
So what's interesting is that when the Bloomberg administration announced that they were going to take a different direction, that was actually right after these rules were passed. So I think they were trying to give themselves cover for following the new law without ever saying, oh, we're going to follow the new law because we haven't been, because we were so bad at this before that there had to be a whole set of regulations written. But these two things happened very close in time. The new regulations were adopted in 2013, and then the department made all these big public statements about how they were going to make a big change in how they were doing this in 2014. But it's not really the department's statement that matters, it's the law. And before 2013, the law was different, and now it's 2020, and we live under this new regime.
Thank you, Paula. Jim? Jim, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I think to kind of wrap on this part, you know, I guess what I'm going to say is, DCP is going to say what they're going to say, right? And part of this process that's going to be useful is getting some clarity in places where we think there should be clarity, but maybe there isn't in practice, right? And it's useful.
I'm sorry, clarity means that for the sessions we just discussed, like what is
Yeah,
their role?
so what I'm saying
Okay.
is, if they're interpreting a rule that seems to go against the way it is written, right, clearly written, right, then we're trying to address this, right, and getting some clarity on that. And I think that what you're likely to see happen, right, is and I'm not saying you shouldn't sign because of this. I'm saying actually maybe you should sign because of this, because it's useful to get clarity on these issues.
Okay.
I mean, I think they're probably going to say, even though we're not in environmental review, that the areas of study as outlined by seeker should inform the way you think about your reasonable worst case development scenario. And I think they will probably push back and say, well, you know, public policy is one of the seeker requirements. But I don't know that they'll say that. Like, I think part of the question here is getting them to be clear about something or not, and then there'll be a lawsuit, right? But if we pose the question, it pushes that forward, right? It pushes that conversation forward, because otherwise, I don't think we'll ever get clarity on that. We can just kind of be spinning our wheels, making small technical revisions endlessly, which may be what they want. We're not sure, right? That may be a strategy that they want. So this kind of says like what's the rule? How are we interpreting it? If you're saying it's okay to interpret policy, then at least we know. We may disagree with that, but we need some clarity here. So that's how I would wrap that.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Do we have more questions? And then I'm gonna open to public. Bill Firms. Bill?
Yes,
Bill, you
I
need
had
to
to
unmute yourself.
unmute my mic, sorry. Hi, I'm a resident of Grand Street, of Seward Park in Grand Street. First of all, I want to thank you all for going through this work, because I realize it could be like mind-numbingly tedious, except it's so hugely important to us that I appreciate it. I just wanted to bring maybe a little, maybe more of a political perspective, and I'll try to be brief. For a different project, I had to go down to see, a group of us went to the City Planning Commission, and we've been dealing with the DCP. And it's pretty clear that the Planning Commission is fairly packed with pro-development folks, which is a problem we run into. But I actually looked it up today, and 6 of the members of the City Planning Commission are appointed by the mayor. 5 of them are appointed by borough presidents, and 1 by the public advocate.
Right.
So my point is just possibly keeping this dragged out and rolling on and stuff like that. I know with one political local Democratic club I'm active with, one of the things they constantly asking all incoming candidates are they going to take any money from real estate developers? So it's my point would be trying to get new elected officials that aren't so completely pro-development, or might appoint a couple people who are more about right-sizing than upsizing. The zoning rules on the City Planning Commission might bring around a change. So making this roll out as long as possible might be the thing to do. It's just one observation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Aaron Gonzalez. Aaron, you need to unmute yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, hello. My name is Aaron Gonzalez, and I'm a tenant leader at Land's End 1 at 275 South Street and a member of Tough LES. We know that New York City has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. It's mired in the worst economic calamity since the financial crisis of the 1970s, when the city nearly went bankrupt. The city's unemployment rate now is near 20%, a figure not seen since the Great Depression. And the losses have been particularly significant among people of color. About 1 in 4 of the city's Asian, Black, and Hispanic workers were unemployed last month. And this has led to more than 14,000 rental households in New York City falling behind on their rent payments. And they are at risk of losing their homes. So it's more important now than ever to protect our vulnerable communities. Our neighborhoods, our people are facing dire crisis, and we need the community board's help. So we ask the members of Community Board 3 to please support the 2 Bridges Rezoning application memo and the cover letter to the Department of City Planning. Thank you.
Aaron. Okay, I don't see any more hands from the public.
My wife would like to speak, if that's
Oh,
possible also.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is
Mm.
Daisy Echevarria, and I'm a resident of Land's End 1, which is located 275 South Street. And I'm also a member of Tough LES. Now, the city's zoning resolution was adopted in 1916 to limit the bulk of skyscrapers because of the widespread anxiety at that time that they will block the air and light below. Now, over 100 years later, we still have the same anxieties, but the coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated them, right? And our Asian, Black, and Hispanic community are being affected to a heightened degree now. So I'm here to ask the members of the Community Board 3 to remind DCP what the city's rezoning or zoning resolution's original mandate was: to preserve and protect communities. So please support the Two Bridges rezoning application, a memo, and the cover letter to the Department of City Planning. Thank you for your time and this platform.
Thank you, Daisy. Seeing no more hands from the public.
Grace has her hand raised, Jackie.
I'm sorry?
Grace has her hand raised, her literal hand.
Let me see. Elise?
Yes, I would like to speak.
Sure. For some reason, I don't see your hand, but anyway. Okay, Elise? Yep.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Grace Mack. I'm a mom with 3 kids, and we reside as a family at 82 Rutgers Slip. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak tonight, not only as a board member of Tough LES, but more importantly, as a longtime resident who grew up around this neighborhood. In the past 6 years, we witnessed many immense and accelerated changes in the Two Bridge area with the disappearance of the Pathmark supermarket that served our community for 29 years. And in its place is the out of context monstrosity luxury building by Excel 1 Manhattan Square, which stands 847 feet tall with 80 stories, overtowering the Manhattan and Brooklyn Bridge and our beautiful Lower East Side waterfront skyline. As you know, these mega developers like Excel and many others out there, once they completed their money-making projects, there is practically very little or absolutely no incentive for them to help or give back to the community. These giant and greedy developers just pack up their money bags and leave. They leave the community holding the bag and having to grapple and deal with the after effects of inadequate city's infrastructure of transportation, insufficient open public space, light and air. Two Bridges is no Park Avenue, Madison Avenue, or Fifth Avenue in terms of monetary wealth, but we are a close-knit community that is very affluent and well off in terms of blended culture, race, mixed diversity, pride, and acceptance of different levels of social low to hardworking middle classes. These types of characters and components is ever so crucial to keep a company intact, especially during these very difficult times during the country's social and racial upheavals, as well as the pandemic crisis. As a grassroots community-centric group, Tough LES, along with Bose and CAV, we are here tonight to ask you to use your moral compass and empathize with us to help Two Bridges be that unique, centric community that continues to bridge and build and bind the gaps of social inequalities, cultural, race, and mixed diversifications. Together, with your support and your strong belief that we can significantly strive to make social changes by forging forward and helping one community at a time. Please vote yes tonight to our rezoning co-application cover letter. Thank you for your service and your community support.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. So let me see, seeing no other hands. So I'm going to ask the committee to decide whether we're gonna approve the letter. So from the conversation we already had, I feel like most of the committee members are in favor of approving the letter. So if I'm not mistaken it, so I don't know if I have a motion to approve the cover letter with the minor edit proposed by Lisa. Do I have a motion for that?
Do you want to
So-
read the, just to read the edit? Sorry.
Yeah. Melanie,
Move it.
Actually, I don't think Lisa offered a specific language.
I actually did, and I sent a copy. I thought I had Paula's email.
I just sent it to you. Melanie, I just sent it to you. We're playing a funny email game. Sorry, Melanie has the document. I have my face. But Melanie has the master document. I have it in my email. I could read it, but...
Oh, you did get the urban justice one? Oh.
Yes, or I don't know, maybe Jim forwarded it to me. Anyway, now
okay.
If we all count to 12, I bet Melanie will find it and be able to insert it where we can all see
Yes,
it. And know
yeah, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. It's okay. Wait. Oh wait, no, this is not the correct. Okay.
Right. It's that.
Okay. So I have the edit. Lisa, which portion is it? It starts here, and how much of this is meant to replace?
I sent the actual document to Jim. Maybe he could, with track changes, maybe he could forward that to you.
I'll forward.
I don't have that, but could we just replace the whole paragraph? I think we trust you, Lisa. Like, I think we talked about the change. So I think, Melanie, you could go.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Does this look right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it reads, your team asked for a rationale explaining why a 60% open space requirement is appropriate and how you determine the additional requirements for new construction on lots where there are existing buildings. Most of the residential development in this area follows the tower and the park design paradigm and coverage requirements, if coupled with height restrictions. In the proposed special district reflect the coverage seen in the residential developments in the area. Low coverage buildings are more appropriate here than high coverage contextual buildings, which are generally preferable. Wait, this seems off.
Yeah, maybe it needs work now that I'm reading it again. But hold on.
While Lisa is working on the changes, Olympia, what is your question?
So I had a process question. So you wanted a motion for this letter because we're going to pass it like a reso and then it's going to be voted on the full board?
Yes.
Great. So, and then shouldn't we also disclose, because we represent one of the 4 co-applicants, that some of our committee members, they also represent the other applicants?
You are saying Trevor
and Damaris, yes.
And Damaris.
Thank you, Olivia. I was going to mention it.
Right. Well,
I'm very clear.
yeah, I guess like later, like before the votes, and so far they have not spoke anyway, so.
No, I was just asking for the process just to make sure, because you asked for a motion and I wasn't sure what we were doing. Thank you.
I'm gonna.
While we're waiting on a personal note, I'm so happy to see all your faces, guys. I missed all the 2 Bridges folks.
Wait, didn't I see you this morning?
Yeah, but we don't work on 2 Bridges on that other call.
If we're just hanging out, when is full board?
Full board is
Right. In blue here is Lisa's edit, and then I brought the original text back just so we can compare them, because it seemed like there were some syntax issues because I was.
Yeah, I think the only problem is one and if we move, most of the residential development in the area follows the tower in the park paradigm and coverage paradigm. And coverage, and maybe that's where the comma goes, and coverage requirements of the proposed special district, if coupled with height restrictions, reflect the coverage seen in the residential development in the area. Low coverage buildings are more appropriate here than high coverage contextual buildings, which are generally preferable. I think that makes sense.
Makes it, sorry.
Other people don't follow? This requirement is consistent with the current design vernacular within the special district.
Emily, is there any way you can enlarge the file? To be honest, I really cannot read it. It's too tiny for me. Yes.
Oh. Jackie, there's a little thing at the top that says view options. You can actually control your own.
Let me see. I thought I'm already pretty much full screen already. Okay, oh, this is better.
Where'd it go?
Now it's really small.
See the whole document.
I can probably send it to everybody.
I mean, I think the language is okay, Jackie. It is just DCP speaking, so it sounds weird, but it's correct, I think.
Yeah, it's just kind of rearranged the.
Did we lose Melanie?
Yep.
Oh,
yeah, I think so.
Connected. Is that what happened?
Yeah. I think she got bumped out.
Oh, drat.
So paragraphs. Lisa, can you just read it for us? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I just did, but I will again. Okay.
Great.
So it's starting with the second sentence in that paragraph. Most of the residential development in the area follows the tower in the park design paradigm, comma, and coverage requirements of the proposed special district, if coupled with height restrictions, reflect the coverage seen in residential developments in the area. Low coverage buildings are more appropriate here than high coverage contextual buildings, which are generally preferable, period.
Oh, can we take out that last phrase? I finally understood what it meant now that you read it with an emphasis.
Okay, you're right. Well, we can take it out. Okay, you're right. This requirement is consistent with the current design vernacular within the special district.
Oh man, I'm gonna put it the way I think I just heard in the chat. Lisa, will you just check that?
What you just heard in the chat, okay? I've got too many screens open here. Got to get back to the chat.
Okay, I'm gonna, Lisa, I'm gonna let you put the paragraph in the chat, and we need to, because I don't know if Melanie is able to come back.
Melanie's coming back. Melanie's on her way back. Or
Okay.
she's trying.
The problem is when I put it in the chat, the track changes. Let's see, maybe I can do it, but if I accept the track changes.
Yeah,
that would
just forget about the
Okay.
chat changes. Just put a new paragraph in the chat box so we can move. Lisa, I don't see your paragraph yet.
Give me a second, please. I'm trying to get it.
Oh, and Melanie's back.
Hi.
Melanie, we're working on a paragraph for you. Lisa's going to put it in the chat in a second.
Should I resume the screen share?
Yeah.
Okay, then
Oh my God, it's so dark where I am. Sorry.
It's in the chat.
Okay. I think we see that. So Melanie, can you just copy this to the file, to the document?
Yes, I can. I can screen share again if
Yep.
Linda makes me a co-host once again. Oh wait, here we go.
You don't need it, right?
Okay. Where's the chat? Okay, here it is in context.
Your team as well, rationale.
Got a couple of extra spaces in it, but other than that, I think it's
Yep.
right.
Okay, all right. Do we have more changes for this letter? If no, then can I have someone to motion to approve the letter?
So moved.
Any 1 second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? So what should we do? Okay, let me see. Because Trevor and Damaris are not voting. So
Are we supposed to be present but not voting?
yeah.
Why not, Jackie, why not do a roll call, which will all be the ending roll call?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want to do. We've also, and that, can we combine that with the roll call to finish the meeting? Yeah.
I think we could, yes.
Okay, then let's do it. Michael. Michael?
If you combine them, how are you going to count Trevor and Damaris as present?
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
They're going to vote
Present,
present but not
non-voting.
voting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Present not voting on the resolution and present at the end.
Okay.
Be a little informal here.
Okay. Jackie, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, people need to give me a second, sorry. Linda, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Michael, how do you vote? Yes. Dominic, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Dominic. Jonathan, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Herman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Herman. Trevor, how do you vote?
Present not voting, co-applicant.
Thank you, Trevor. Lisa, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa. Olympia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Damaris, how do you vote?
Present not voting, co-applicant.
Thank you, Damaris. Troy, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Steve, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you, Steve. And Tim, did Tim join?
No.
Right, we'll say absent. So we have 10 yeses, 2 present not voting, and 1 absent.
And we are also adjourning the meeting. Thank you so much, guys. The letter got approved, and then it will be sent to the full board, and it is likely going to be approved by full board as well. We will be in touch with you guys, with the co-applicants. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Paula, for joining us tonight.
Yep.
And also Chris. And that's all for the meeting tonight.
Jackie, you made it. It's 7:54.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can all
Very
do
well
it.
done.
Thank you. Okay.
Good
thank you,
work,
guys. Good
everyone.
night.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you so much.